This is just a number of publications using the term microbiome, which is the bacteria and organisms that live on you and in you. And you can see that there's a massive increase in the number of publications in relatively recent years, starting off around 2006, 2007. And this data only goes to last year. Obviously, this year is still ongoing, but expected to be even higher. My first foray into nutrient microbiome interactions actually happened in 1984. So this ended here in 90. So you can imagine the number of publications. Now here it's probably close to zero. And there were some very interesting aspects when we first started proposing these types of events as an explanation for a disease. And we'll get to that as we discuss it. But in general, the whole concept of nutrient microbiome interactions, I'd like to sort of use this sort of diagram to explain that historically we think of diet and food going to the host, and there's a number of sort of interactions. And to a lesser extent, the intestinal microbiota. And this type of interaction is thought to be rather simplistic until relatively new research has come through. And so the idea of the nature of these interactions is digestive components or food components that is not normally picked up by the host, although that idea is perhaps worthy of being challenged at the moment. And then the normal diet is what is digested and picked up by the host. I think this is going to become a lot more complex as we go forward in understanding the dynamics and back and forth. Because now there's even excellent evidence that the intestinal microbiota is actually exchanging genes with the host, not just undigested food components. So it's much more complex. So my first foray into nutrient microbiome interactions involved a disease that afflicts premature infants. It's called necrotizing enterocolitis, or NEC. The dynamics is that premature infants need nutrition. Obviously, they're born early. They're no longer getting their nutrition from the placenta. And so physicians try and be rather aggressive in trying to get nutrition into the infant so they can both survive and grow. The problem lies in the fact that the gastrointestinal tract has all the elements of prematurity as well. It's not just the whole baby. It has a gut that is not used to digesting all the nutrients coming from the placenta. It has bad motility. And it's getting colonized for the first time in an intensive care unit, which is always notorious for having the wrong bacteria. There's lots of antibiotics being sprinkled around. It's a bad situation. In addition, this particular disease, NEC or NEC, comes in epidemics. So often, with great trepidation, it runs through an NIC unit, which should give you an idea that there's an infectious component to it. And the other aspect is the peak period of NEC onset is 3 weeks. And the majority of neonatologists then, and still to some extent now, believe that the cause of NEC was actually a result of birth asphyxia, sort of an asphyxia-hypoxia environment, which is inconsistent with a 3 weeks postpartum onset of the disease. You don't really have a hypoxic event and then wait 3 weeks for the sequelae of that event. It is, however, consistent with acquiring bacteria and interacting with nutrients as the infant is fed. So, it's the number 2 source of mortality for premature babies. Again, primarily 3 weeks. And the characteristics of this particular disease also have other hallmarks that we believe was due to a bacterial component, in that one of the diagnostic features is bowel wall gas. So there is gas What we proposed back in '84, so we're 31 years ago now, it was that aggressive feeding, enteral feeding, interacts with bacteria that are in the intestine, and in the context of very poor motility, establishes an excessive production of short-chain fatty acids as a result of fermentation, and that lowering of the luminal pH leads to necrosis. And in fact, if you go back into the intestinal lumen of these premature babies, even though it's the intestine, the pH can get down to 3, just more like gastric. When we actually proposed this theory, we were literally booed at pediatric meetings because one of the aspects of this was that it was aggressive feeding, which makes it a physician-related disorder. But we developed an animal model using the bacteria isolated from the infants. We put in rabbits. We did a intestinal ligation to mimic low motility. And then we defined the disease as being luminal in origin, but having oxidant-driven parameters. We showed that we could negate the damage by intravenous superoxide dismutase, which breaks down superoxide, and then a whole host of other inflammatory mediators. And it largely just got dismissed by the community. And we moved on. I went on career-wise to do other things related to infants, but I'm very pleased to say that the concept survived and the concept flourished. So there's actually a French company that makes probiotics, a particular strain of Lactobacillus rhamnosus, and they've actually been giving it to premature babies in an extensive period of time. This is a publication in the American Journal of Perinatology. And it's now up to 1,130 subjects of premature infants that have received this particular probiotic. And with so the gestation is 24 to 31 weeks is the nature of the infants, so they are very premature infants. And the results of just this probiotic was an 80% reduction in the incidence of NEC. There was a 54% reduction in mortality, 40% reduction in the onset of late onset sepsis, and it was well tolerated. So now we're at a stage where we've got this concept that very early in life, if you manipulate the bacterial flora, you can have a better outcome. So I take this as a massive positive. And also, in the general field of probiotics, this is a testament to the fact that probiotics can have a major difference in our health. So, taking it out of the premature infant scenario, which I really raised simply because it was my origins view, and speaking more generally, these are the types of dietary factors that will have an interaction with the microbiome. And it's not necessarily a complete list. Certainly the sugars, fats, you may not be as aware of the organosulfur compounds interacting. There is the production of, say, hydrogen sulfide in the gut lumen. Normally we've considered this to be just a smelly gas that is of no use. But there's a lot of evidence now that says hydrogen sulfide is both an excellent vasodilator, maintains blood flow in the gut wall, and in addition has other actions on the enterocyte. So I've mentioned here promoting the biofilm, so it produces a biofilm lining the intestine that is resistant then to the bad bacteria. Another aspect that's somewhat related is the bacterial nitrate reductase, and I will talk about this in both several organizations. then I've lumped these three conditions together because it relates to the work of the Hazen group in Cleveland. And I'll discuss that as well. So these are the particular areas that are receiving the most attention, I think, research-wise, as a result of conditions outside the gut that may be influenced by nutrient microbiome interactions. So I didn't show the full paper, maybe because the press release only just came out recently and preparing the slides I didn't have access to the full paper. So this is quite recent, 22nd of June. But what these researchers showed that it was a mice study, that if they fed the mice a high-fat, high-sugar diet, they actually changed the gut flora in these mice, and it was associated with a significant loss of what they called cognitive flexibility. So going through different mazes and other tests related to cognition was directly related to that particular diet. And the most effective in causing these derangements in cognitive flexibility related to a high sugar diet, both in sort of short-term memory defects as well as long-term memory. So we're beginning to see changes in flora as a result of diet influencing issues that have great societal interest at the moment, like cognitive decline. The FODMAPs and food intolerance I mentioned are particularly associated with irritable bowel syndrome. And I guess one of the aspects of being in the field for long enough, you see variances in the way we discuss things. So at least in the US, everyone seems to be running around saying that they're gluten intolerant or gluten sensitive. And what they're actually probably saying is that having adverse responses to a variety of foods, that just jumping on a bandwagon as it relates to gluten. A lot of what they may be experiencing with gluten sensitivity, which is entirely different immune response to celiac disease, is that they may be having an interaction between the FODMAPs that are in those foods associated with gluten and resulting in an increase in these strains or families of bacteria and a reduction in the bifidobacteria. So you're getting an imbalance in the change in the profile. So it's a much more general condition which we tend to blame on the particular individual food component and not really the players, which are the bacteria. The other aspect about irritable bowel syndrome is that you can transfer the disease by taking animals that you've created irritable bowel syndrome, applying it to a naive animal, and they then develop irritable bowel syndrome. So this is an ongoing theme that you can transfer a lot of different diseases by transplanting the fecal flora from one individual to another individual. And so you transfer the disease over with it. And irritable bowel syndrome that is apparent, and that's not normally discussed in terms of being an infectious disease. So these are some of the fibers that can be largely useful in terms of increasing the potential of these particular strains. You see they're primarily on the bifidobacteria, but that's not necessarily exclusively. And these types of fibers, both soluble and insoluble, have potential for regulating our gut microbiome as terms of dictating health. And as a result, there's a number of studies related to health conditions related to inflammation, colon cancer, mineral bioavailability, cardiovascular disease. All of these things come into play by using fibers. I wanted to move out of things that you may think classically like fibers, so I'm being a little dismissive of fibers. I wanted to discuss things that you may not have thought of in the time that I have. So one of them is nitrate, in particular organic nitrate. It's essentially fertilizer. So the fertilizer is in the ground, the plants pick it up, and it becomes part of the plant as it's delivered in terms of the diet. And what we do know is the Mediterranean Japanese diets are generally very rich in exceeds the acceptable daily intake of nitrate. So, for example, if you looked at spinach, there is more nitrate in there, about 7-fold higher than what the USDA allows for nitrate. So the laws currently in the US are kind of redundant. And if you think of the Mediterranean Japanese diets, they are associated with superior cardiovascular health and in general longevity. So what is it in the diet that's doing that? And I propose to you one of the major components is the fertilizer, or at least nitrate. And there was a study, there was crossover design, where they used elements of the traditional Japanese diet. So they had 5 times the nitrate from the acceptable daily intake in the US. And they did it over 10 days, and they got reductions in blood pressure. So here is an element that you do in a tightly controlled environment, having an impact on cardiovascular events rather quickly. So how does it do that? And this is the mechanism. You have food, and in this case, high nitrate foods. This is nitrate. It interacts with a bacteria in the mouth and saliva, which has an enzyme called bacterial nitrate reductase. And what it does is it converts nitrate to nitrite, which is then swallowed in the saliva. And then nitrate is readily absorbed. And in the tissues, on demand, depending on the circumstances, nitrate is converted back to nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a vasodilator involved in a number of events, immunity, neural function, particularly blood pressure. Now, historically, we know that arginine feeds into nitric oxide and cleaves off citrulline, but this is not really the rate-dependent factor, arginine. There's plenty of arginine in plasma. So this nitrate-nitrite nitric oxide cycle is like filling up a bathtub. You're constantly losing it through losses through the feces and urine, but from the diet, we're filling it up. And the higher nitrate diets are associated with maintaining a very healthy nitrate cycle, and that's associated with reduced cardiovascular disease. I'm not showing the results, but recently I developed a product that used beetroot as the source of nitrate, and we had about 3 grams of beetroot powder extract, high level of nitrate, and we did a study looking at nitric oxide dependent sports performance, and we showed reduced propensity to getting fatigued and increased recruitment of muscles as it relates to sports performance. But there's plenty of other studies using beetroot for cardiovascular events as well as sports performance. So where are the sources of nitrate? We have very low levels, which is very typical of a Western diet. The high levels are in things like celery. Lettuce is interesting, again, largely fertilizer, beetroot, spinach, bok choy. So this is not necessarily, at least in the US, the top level choices for diets. They tend to like potatoes and beans and carrots and things like that. Also note bacon, where they've used nitrate for preservation, is actually quite low. So don't think that you can just load up on bacon and get all your nitrate. If you want to eat bacon, just eat bacon. Okay, so getting back to these thoughts, we're developing this type of interaction again, but we're fleshing it out into the not just digestible components, things like nitrate and sulfhydryl compounds that come in the diet. It's getting more complex now. The last thing I wanted to sort of jump into before getting into some speculation is the results of some research that was done in the Cleveland group. The head investigator's name was Hazen, who's shown a number of rather controversial studies that suggested that red meat will cause cardiovascular disease, and it's the bane of your existence and all these other aspects, and he was throwing in shellfish, eggs, a whole bunch of things that made people panic. And the dynamics of that was that he was showing that things like choline, phosphatidylcholine, lecithin, carnitine, in general red meat and shellfish, interact with the gut flora to produce TMAO. Actually, it produces is then converted to TMAO in the liver, and if you directly infuse TMAO into the circulation, you develop cardiovascular disease or atherosclerosis. And so that then this may be related also to the other dynamics that are either ongoing or interactive as it relates to other aspects of the diet and drivers of atherosclerosis. The flaws that were in that particular study, even though TMAO is a driver for atherosclerosis, is that there's a lot of overlap. So we studied vegetarians that lacked this diet, but they had about 75% the same TMAO level. So it was greatly varied from individual to individual. And just giving up meat or eggs or other elements didn't really explain all the data. What was shown in his research was that if you give antibiotics, the TMA levels plummet, whether you're a vegetarian or a carnivore or an omnivore. And the bottom line for that is that it's the nature of the gut flora that's driving this process. The nutrients are being picked up, but the major variable is actually the flora. And so I think the future research, as it relates to TMAO and atherosclerosis, is not necessarily preoccupied with what is the nutrients that's being ingested to drive atherosclerosis, but rather what is the nature of the gut flora that's really pushing this particular approach. So that is something to look at as it develops in the future. One thing on weight management, I'm sorry that my Australian colleague here, who doesn't think you should do anything other than carry heavy shoes and large handbags as a treatment for obesity, there are other things that he needs to address. But don't worry, I've taunted him on the side. So here's the proposal that all weight management will start with the wrong gut flora. And as a result, there's a number of events. This is incredibly simplistic, but inflammation will go up with the wrong flora. You have a response where you get increased insulin resistance as a result of defects and imbalances in appetite and satiety. And as a result of that, you'll eat more and gain weight. Rather simplistic, but starting off as the driver of the wrong gut flora is becoming quite well appreciated, at least in the scientific community, less so in the public. So, what are the factors leading to a wrong gut flora that's driving the obesity epidemic? We do know that meat in our diet contains antibiotics. And this was a side effect that was noted very early on after the widespread development of antibiotics, which were essentially stimulated by World War II. There was a great need to reduce death rates as a result of war injuries, and antibiotics was the impetus there. Then in the early 50s, they found that if they fed animals antibiotics, they got this really large increase in meat production in animal size. They actually did some experiments with children, and they found out literally the 50s was a great time for bizarre science. But they showed that you could get increase in growth rates giving long-term antibiotics to humans. What we do now is we get the antibiotics through the food that we eat that's treated with antibiotics. So again, antibiotics are used in the meat industry to increase their mass. We eat the meat, and as a result, we get larger. So I just put this little factoid at the bottom here as perspective. In the meat industry in the USA, North Carolina, for its poultry and pork production, use more antibiotics than all of the humans for all of the USA, all of the states added together. That's how much antibiotics is being used in our meat industry. So I'm not trying to pick on North Carolina as the naughty state. It's all over. But the actual numbers show that North Carolina uses more antibiotics for meat than we do for all of the humans in the USA. So that's perspective. As a result of this, Martin Blazer, who had the Human Microbiome Project, has stated that the modern diet, this high-calorie diet, large servings that are very characteristic of our antibiotics could be contributing. And if you want a really nice lay summary of this whole particular area, even though it's a little old because it was last year, go to the New York Times, March 8th, 2014 edition in the magazine section. They give this lovely little lay summary of the potential of antibiotics as being involved in the obesity epidemic. And the title of the article was called The Fat Drug, the fat drug being antibiotics. Remember also temporally, the obesity epidemic coincides with the development and use of antibiotics. The obesity epidemic started to take off in the 50s when we had use of antibiotics. Now what I wanted to do is build upon what I talked about earlier about IBS being potentially an infectious disease and talking about obesity being an infectious disease, and just sort of highlight a few studies. There's been, and you discussed, I think the other day, that there was studies where there's naive animals are fed the microbiome or fecal flora of an obese animal, and the naive individual grows up to be obese. Lean creates lean. There's also been a number of twin studies. So these are humans transferring obesity to mice. So you have identical twins, one obese and one were genetically identical. Phenotypically, one is obese, one is lean, and taking the fecal flora from the obese individual, transfecting it to a naive mouse, that mouse grows up to be obese. The lean individual creates lean mice. So there's a number of studies associated with that. There was also a lovely study coming out of China where they looked at obese individuals and changed their diets with prebiotics, documented their flora, showed the reduction in certain families and toxic strains. As the individual lost weight, they changed that flora, and then they noted that the original flora, when put back into animals, made the animals obese, and then when he was in a lean state after a year of dietary manipulation, produced lean animals. So it does show that obesity fulfills the criteria of an infectious disease in that the disease parallels the infectious agent. The infectious agent being the wrong gut flora. As a result of that, and this is certainly influenced by nutrition, fecal transplants have been used to treat a really nasty disease, primarily that's in hospitals, Clostridium difficile, or C. diff, as it's commonly referred to. And fecal transplants from a donor tends to be almost a miraculous cure for C. diff. Within days, they recover. And a fecal transplant, which is essentially taking a stool sample, mixing it with saline solution, and through an enema, delivering it into the lower bowel of the recipient. That actually has like a massive probiotic effect and a huge influence on the gut flora very, very quickly. So for C. diff, this has been a lifesaver for me. I propose to you that this is actually going to offer the same benefits for obesity. If we understand that obesity is caused by the wrong gut flora, yes, it's not as fatal in the short term as C. diff, but when that knowledge is appreciated and comes into play, given the obesity epidemic, particularly here in America, we're going to use fecal transplantation as a mode of treating obesity. If you appreciate that, then I would propose to you what happens next. And this is something I often do, is I think about, okay, if that's going to happen, that's the logical next step. What will happen next? How will society interact? And I would propose to you, this is the future landscape. If it works, and I have no doubt that it will work, it will become regulated, right? If any medical intervention works effectively, because you want to make sure that there'll be a screening process and the donor doesn't contain X or Y in other infectious agent. You're taking their word that they're healthy. No, you'll screen it and regulate it. If you regulate it and screen it, what happens? The cost goes up, right? It'll be an intervention. There is, some outpatient treatment, the screening. You can see that this getting to be, at least in the US, several $1,000s worth of treatment, which, by the way, would be a massive health saving if it did cure obesity. Okay. So what happens when the cost goes up? The product has no fiscal value, and we throw it away every day. So there's a discord. You're using several $1,000s for a treatment of something that everyone throws away. Total discord. There will be social change and difficulty managing that. And I propose to you in every other situation where you have this scenario where you're asking someone to pay a lot for something that you can get for free, then you develop a black market, right? And the black market will involve a change in the way that society thinks and works. So I propose that the social media and the blogosphere will establish things like fecal entry. There will be social groups where lean individuals will be recruited to donate their microbiome. There may even be obesity parties where a bunch of obese individuals invite their favorite lean friends, and in the confine of the party there'll be a donation, there'll be a blender, a salt solution, lubricants and tubing, and you're off to curing your obesity.
We will do that sample.
Exactly. So there may even be on Amazon.com do-it-yourself kits. They'll be discounted. Donors will be sought and encouraged. There'll be special Facebook groups. There'll be a whole range of new merchandising available. There'll be badges and T-shirts that say "Eat shit, lose weight." The last one here, I've got biotechnology approaches and alternatives that will come up. That's already happening. There are biotechnology companies already that have feces in little capsules that you swallow. The problem I have is that most capsules, like veggie caps and other capsules, actually break down in the stomach. You have to have a special capsule to make sure it doesn't gets to the intestines. So you want to deliver the bacteria, and you also don't want to be having shit burps, I guess, is the process. But also, if they do have this sort of do-it-yourself aspect, there will be a spread of the disease because you really don't know if the donor is real or not. So that is the sort of disturbing thought I wanted to leave you with. I am a great proponent of nutrient microbiome interactions. I really do believe that obesity is an infectious disease. I do believe that it will cause social upheaval, and I do believe that there is some potential merchandising activities available for the entrepreneurs in the audience to do that. So I leave you with that thought and open up for questions. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to have time for one question. So,
really very interesting. It opens up a lot of ideas. But I was wondering, there are no experiments to really see which microbes are responsible, for instance, in the lean or the obese person to cause these, or is it an interaction of many?
There's a lot, actually, and I sort of didn't document them. I think we've isolated now 1,000 different species from the human gut.
I mean, that can cause the lean or...
So different families, so generally the bifidobacteria, generally on the positive side, it used to be about the large intestine, and that the Firmicutes family and other families are generally associated with deleterious effects, and that if you put them back in, you can't get them. So it is reasonably well known, and we know what we should be looking for, but again, it's early stages, so the subtleties will vary. I think I have to connect. We're going to move on. We're out of time.
Where we've hit our coffee break, so I
We
mean,
did?
yeah.
You can ask me the question, Colin.
Thank you for an excellent lecture. My name is Dr. Hillel Mazansky. So few physicians in America are using probiotics when they prescribe antibiotics.
Yeah.
And because of antibiotic resistance, they're using stronger and stronger antibiotics, which, as you said, lead to C. difficile, necessitating the use of flagyl and other medications, and they also get severely dehydrated as a result thereof. If only they would use probiotics when they use the antibiotics, all these complications would be prevented.
I think that's become the general. Here's the deal: physicians are not used to talking about probiotics in any shape or form. I think that there is a dilemma and open for discussion about whether you should take the probiotics when you're taking the antibiotics, because the drugs will kill the good ones as well as the bad ones. I've had a lot of discussions with colleagues about what to do. Generally, I think people will say, follow the course of the antibiotics, and once it's finished, then start the probiotics. In theory, the antibiotics will kill the bacteria that you're taking in the probiotics as well. And so you could either split them up, but I still think that's not going to be the case. And it's a dilemma. I've actually apologized to my probiotic capsule if I've been on antibiotics and say, I'm sorry, I'm ingesting you, but I'm killing you at the same time. But these are weird conversations I have to my own supplements, so that tells you something.
Thank you.
Sometimes they suggest to space it out, take antibiotics after a couple of hours, take the probiotics.
True, and there's no evidence that really, that sort of hopefulness.
Yeah, right.
But the conversation is being had. So.
All right, guys, we're going on our break. I want to start at 10:55, so please be back. Until then, enjoy your coffee break.
This is